say you lose your keys or you lose your job or something else happens. Instead of reacting, can we respond?
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, we have a very, very special guest. He is someone who has done some really extreme things with regards to both mentally and physically. In fact, he actually is the author of a book called Chasing Extreme, a journey of overcoming obstacles and depression to embrace a life of extreme adventure. And his name is Luke Tyburski. And Luke has done well, let me put it this way. In 2016, he was listed as one of Forever Sports magazine's list of 50 fittest athletes in the world for 2016, but it came at a cost. And for the next 18 months, he suffered from extreme adrenal fatigue alongside very dark holes of depression and more binge eating. And he says he was more lost than ever. But in the following years, following the ultimate triathlon, which he competed, which I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about that. I believe it included swimming from Africa to Europe, which is pretty crazy, a 12-day ultimate triathlon, which is just incredible. And he spent a lot of time reflecting on his actions, speaking to others about his thoughts, listening to his body. He's also someone that's been coaching and working with elite athletes for about 20 years now, some of the most extreme athletes. So he's very, very well-versed in mental. That's what we're going to talk about more today. We talk a lot about, the health aspects and nutrition, but really what I want to go in deep today with Luke is about the mental side of things, the mindset side, and how that can relate back to you as someone who's probably not competing in some ultra marathon, triathlon, anything like that, but just trying to be the best you in your personal life. And he has some amazing tools and mindsets and concepts that we're going to go into. Real quick, before we get started, if you are a repeat listener, we do ask that you please subscribe, rate, review the podcast. That really helps us get found. And if you find value, please do share it with others. And I'm sure you will be finding value here as well. So Luke Tyburski, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast here today.
Wow, what an intro. Thanks so much for that, Talora. I'm looking forward to diving into having a conversation with you about peak performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's give a little brief background about how you kind of how you grew up and became some ultra marathon triathlete competitor.
Yeah, I'll try and be very brief. It's a bit of a long-winded story, but I can cut it down. So yes, you can tell from the accent, I grew up in Australia, and my whole dream as a child was to be a professional soccer player. That was it. That's all I ever wanted to do. My uncle played soccer, not at a high level, just in the local town. And as my only uncle in the town where I grew up in, I looked up to him. So I wanted to be like my uncle. And my dad played rugby league and my mum played various sports, but I just wanted to be like my uncle. So played soccer and got to the age of around 14, 15, started to develop, went through puberty, and all the hard work I'd been putting in throughout my early teenage years. And, for context, I was the last person picked, or sometimes I'd be sitting on the bench and wouldn't even play in games for my local representative team. And then I hit puberty and all the hard work that I would put in for the years prior. I then all of a sudden became a star and was being looked at by the junior national team and, playing all around the country, traveling around the country, playing this game that I loved. And it was quite literally happened overnight. And then I started to realize, well, maybe I was good enough to play professionally. And I had some success in Australia playing in the top league over there. And I tell a joke that now you probably couldn't do it, but I would leave school at lunchtime on a Friday because I would have to fly to some other area in Australia. So I had a note from my guardians who I was living with, because I wasn't living with my parents anymore, because I had to go and move away for my career progression. So I would leave school at lunchtime to fly to go and play on a Saturday night at a city somewhere else in Australia. So I focused on, during this period of time, how can I be the best version of myself? And I know we hear that a lot, but for me, it was and this is for context for our conversation as it develops. For me, it was what food should I be eating as an athlete? And I'm 14 at this stage, 15, reading sports nutrition books and things like this. What food should I eat? How should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? What strength training should I be doing? What conditioning training should I be doing? Dove into sports psychology as, 14, 15-year-old kid, not because my parents were pushing me or gave anything to me. It was all off my own back. My parents didn't push me or do anything. They were like, well, why are you reading this? I was like, oh, help me do this, and it can help me do that. So it was almost like I had to convince them that this is going to help me. And then the top league in Australia sort of got broken down, and there was money troubles with the sport. And they basically said, we're not going to have any top league in Australia for 2.5 years. And I'm 20 at the time. And I thought, I've got to get out of this country because it's not going to help me. I actually went over to America and played in college for a couple of years to finish my exercise science degree. Once again, how can I learn more about the body and the mind and to perform? And then I bounced around the lower leagues in the professional leagues in America before then ending up in Belgium, playing over there in the lower leagues. And then in the UK, where I live today, playing in the lower leagues again. And to go from there to ultra endurance challenges, I retired at the age of 28 through multiple physical injuries. And at the same time, during this period for about 2 years before I retired, I started to suffer with depression because of these injuries, because I was struggling to find clubs. I would get a 6-month contract and then I would be out of work for, 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, whatever it was. So my mental health suffered. And I grew up in a very loving family. I had a decent amount of support around me from friends that I'd made in London, where I was now living. But I was clinically depressed. And it took me just over 2 years to actually go and talk to someone. So then when I did retire, I had this loss of identity, because remember, all Luke wanted to do was play soccer. So then now physically my body wouldn't allow me to do this. I decided that I would change my direction and also distract myself and the rest of the world, or the people that were in my world, with what I was going to do next. And that was become what I called an endurance adventurer. And that was, in short, travel around the world doing some of the world's craziest and toughest physical challenges, write books about them, write magazine articles about them, speak on stages about them, have documentaries made about these epic adventures. And that was going to be my plan. And that was it. So on one hand, it gave me a focus, but on the other side, it really was a distraction for myself to not actually stop and face up to what I was going through mentally. And at the same time, if someone said, oh, now you're retired, what are you doing? I would say, well, I'm doing this endurance adventuring stuff. And in 6 months, I'm running, 155 miles in a week through the middle of the Sahara Desert. So everyone was like, you're crazy, but wow, that's amazing. So it was distracting them as well from actually what I was dealing with internally.
And then tell us about in 2015, when you did this super extreme 12-day challenge.
Yeah. So doing big sort of races and challenges, for me, it was all about getting exposure and showing people what I could do and get people's attention, so to speak. And that would give me content to speak about on stage. Now we're going back 2011, 2012, before really social media was the marketing beast it is today. Let's say. So yeah, social media was around and you could use it, but it was not like how it was. So it wasn't about followers. It was about showing people that I'd done all these crazy things to talk on stage and then, get commissioned to write magazine articles. But I always knew that I needed to do something really big to really get people's attention. And I literally stared at a world map on my laptop and just, with adventure on my mind, went, right, let's find something epic to do. Now, I could swim. And I grew up riding a bike to and from my friend's house, and I played soccer, so I could run. But prior to the end of 2011, I had never swam more than probably one length of a pool at a time. And apart from riding to friends' houses, I'd never rode my bike for any sort of length of time, and running, well, like a 5-mile run in preseason training, that was it, you know?
Mm.
So I saw this, it caught my eye really. This, and I say for people who are watching, this will make sense. But if you're listening, I've got like my fingers just sort of held just close together. I saw this little gap between Europe and Africa. And I thought, on my map on my laptop, I thought that doesn't look too big. Maybe I could swim that. And I went, oh, Morocco to Spain. And I thought, well, maybe I get on my bike and I cycle east along the south of France. I've heard that's south of Spain. Sorry. I thought that sounds pretty cool. And then I hit France, and then I went, well, hang on. Why don't I run to the next country, which just so happens to be Monaco? And the cycle was a lot longer than the run, and the swim seemed a little bit shorter. So then I spent the next couple of months doing a bit of research and went, wow, I think this 2,000 kilometer or 1,300 mile swim, cycle, and run from Morocco to Monaco is doable. And for some reason, I decided 12 days was my target. And I set myself, like 4 years from the first time I from concept really to when I did it. 4 years to take it on. And I did all these big challenges beforehand as training, so to speak. And I went out there and took on what no one had ever done before, this route, this distance in this amount of time, and had an award-winning documentary made about it named The Ultimate Triathlon.
Amazing. Amazing. So what did you learn about going through that, right? And dealing with the challenges of that? What are some insights that you have mentally in terms of people who can, or maybe it's just insights about the human body and how when we think we can't go anymore, we can go, what are some insights that you learned from that?
So one of the biggest ones, and I'm pretty sure I actually mentioned it in real time during the challenge, and the filmmaker caught it on camera. We hear about this whole thing of like when your mind wants to quit, your body still has 30%, 70%, 60% to go. You hear this all the time. You hear it in like Navy SEALs, right? Like I think that's probably where it originated from. However, if you train your mind in an efficient way, and a way that you can actually make it stronger, and then you're constantly challenging it, what I showed, not intentionally, by all means, was that your mind can actually be stronger than your body. So your mind can be saying, well, my mind literally was saying, Luke, keep running, keep going, mumbling to myself, being as positive as I could, but then I would literally pass out from complete exhaustion. And you see that in the documentary.
Wow.
And then I get up the next day and I drive myself into the ground again, and I collapse and I pass out from complete exhaustion, even though I'm mumbling to myself, keep going, take another step. You can do this. Now, is it healthy? No, it's not. Is it dangerous? 100%. Would I recommend it to anyone or even myself to do this again? Not at all. You've got to remember, and for context, during this period of my life, I was in a very, very dark hole, suffering with my mental health. And this was my escape. And this was a way of almost self-harming myself doing this challenge. But I had trained my mind to be so strong, to be so resilient, that no matter what my body did, my mind was always going to be telling my body to keep going, keep doing this. Now, this is on the extreme side of things. So maybe how do we scale this back to everyday life?
Yeah.
Well, training your mind on a daily basis, choosing to do difficult things, is a way that you can build your resilience. So then the pandemic is a great example, a great example. And because it's fresh in everyone's mind, so to speak, although a lot of people try to forget it, but it's a great example. I had friends, I had loved ones, I had acquaintances who, from a personal level, thrived during, let's call it 2 years of the pandemic, right? Thrived from a personal level, not business, but from a personal level. The lockdowns, the restrictions, whatever your thoughts were on how different governments handled it, but all of that, they thrived, and it was not even a blip on their radar.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side, I had friends, I had family members, I had acquaintances who literally crumbled during those 2 years, lost businesses, started to turn to different substances, really was in a dark hole. Now, I've been able to take a step back and talk to all these people, and it's the ones who were consistently challenging themselves. It's the ones who have some sort of routine or some sort of strategy or some sort of processes that they go through to consciously train their mind on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, that when this massive step back that none of us had any control over hit the entire globe, i.e. the pandemic, it didn't really faze them. But other people literally crumbled. So how I train my mind, and to show you in the documentary what it looks like from an extreme sporting physical level, but it's the same concept too on a day-to-day basis, say when like the pandemic happened, or say you lose your keys or you lose your job or something else happens. Instead of reacting, can we respond? And the first step in this, and Viktor Frankl from the Man's Search for Meaning book, it's a great book if anyone is looking for something to really sort of broaden your horizons on things. He talks about choosing your attitude and the gap between a stimulus and your response. And I put another step in there. There's a gap between a stimulus, whether it's a positive or negative, and actually choosing your attitude, and then choosing how you respond, not react. And it comes from pausing and just having a breath. So it gives you a chance to consciously think about what has happened, acknowledge how you feel about it, accept what has happened, that you can't do anything about it, and then how am I going to respond and not react? So that's a great little tool that I use, is just take a breath. And I mean this literally. Take a breath.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, that's actually one of the, I think I mentioned this before, this is one of the biggest things I've been working on personally for the last couple of years as well, is how do I be less reactive, right? When something triggers me, how can I stop, take a deep breath, reframe it, not react, right? I think this is, it's interesting as I talk to people who, I guess for lack of a better word, are on a high level or mentally, or have done a lot of work on personal development on themselves. It comes back to this thing of, are you just reacting, or can you actually, because either way you have to deal with the situation, right? So you can choose to deal with it in a reactive, get angry, get frustrated, and that's just bad for your health. Or you can just choose to, take your deep breaths, be cool, be calm about it, handle it in a cool, calm, collected way. And by doing that, you just, evolve yourself as a person.
100%. Now, and I've had these conversations with people, they say, yeah, Luke, but sometimes these things happen and they're negative things. Like I lost my job, or even I had a loved one that passed away. I can't just be positive. I can take a breath. I can take a breath and pause and choose my attitude and then take action. But but it's still negative. When say a loved one passes or something, or you lose a job, 100%, I agree. For me, it's not about being positive all the time and being a positive no matter what happens, whether it's a negative situation, scenario, outcome that happens. As I said before, whether it's losing your keys or losing your job or misplacing, your keys or losing a loved one even. It's something that I call being less negative, because we can't be positive all the time when we're faced with a setback. Now, that could be from an external stimulus or something we did ourselves. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. And some of those mistakes that I make, even though I have the best intentions when I try to accomplish these things, they cause me distress, So, and they can be deemed negative. So for me to be less negative, it's a really simple thing. You ask yourself 3 questions. Firstly, you take a breath. So it gives you a chance to respond and don't react. Then you ask yourself, what happened? How did it happen? And then where do I now need to focus in order to help me move forwards? Now, those 3 questions, they're not jumping up and down and say, come on, just think positive. If you think positive and you visualize what you want to achieve and overcome this obstacle, everything's going to be great. Like, I've lost loved ones. I'm sorry. It hurts. And I can't be positive. However, I can be less negative and give myself a focus to work through, for this example, the grief, to work through if you lose your job. Okay, now what am I going to do? What happened? So you actually understand the mechanisms of what happened. How did it happen? Was it my fault? Was it someone else's fault? Can I learn from the experience? And then where do I now need to focus? Because then it gives you a direction for your attention. So then you can start taking steps in moving forward. So what happened? How did it happen? Where do I now need to focus in order to move forwards? Is thinking less negative when faced with a setback or an obstacle, whether it's from your own doing, whether you make a mistake, or if it's something out of your control.
I love that. Love that framework. Love those questions. That's really, really good. Switching gears just a little bit, because I know you work with a lot of, high level executives. You've worked with a lot of high level athletes over the years. What are some of the things that you are seeing, I guess, that people are struggling with, or that, or kind of mindset shifts that you've been able to, that you teach in your speaking and coaching? Obviously, you just gave a great one right there. But any others in terms of, like, as you're coaching these executives or extreme athletes, what are some of the mental hurdles or things that, or frameworks that you're trying to kind of teach them?
Peak performance, high performance, we are all high performers. That's one of the things that I like to talk about, is we are all high performers. And it might surprise people, but there are some C-suite executives that don't view themselves as high performers. And there are some elite athletes who I've worked with that also don't view themselves as high performers. And I also work with elite teenagers in certain sports. And it blows my mind what they can do at their age. And they think that, they're not going to make the team, or they're not going to perform well, or this and that, whatever. And everyone knows if they keep doing what they're doing, they will exceed their expectations. So the first thing is to acknowledge that when you're looking at yourself in terms of high performance, it's really simple. All you've got to do is try and get a little bit better each day. If you do, then you're high performing. If you don't, you are performing at your highest level. Because the example that I will give is, if you have a student at school that gets D's, and all of a sudden the next year they get half C's and half D's, are they high performing? They've achieved something that they've never achieved before. So they are a high performer. But then if they go back to getting all D's, their performance has dropped. But if they maintain getting C's and D's, they're performing at their highest level, because that is the highest level that they have ever performed at. So it's reframing what their accomplishments are, of, okay, I can be a high performer if I continually try and achieve more each day. And I'd say each day, literally and figuratively at the same time. But at the same time, is if I'm not achieving more than I ever have before, I'm performing at my highest level.
Hmm.
So it just changes the framework of it. And we always focus on the process rather than what other people are doing. And it's really giving people this idea that it is all about what you're doing in that moment, because that is mindset, that is high performing. It's only in the moment that you're in. So how can we be more present? And all the things that we talk about, breathing and making sure that you remove distractions, consciously remove distractions and things like that will help you. But at the same time is, as I said, on the less negative thinking, the reason why that is so helpful is if you get hit with a setback, it gives you a constructive focus to help you move forwards. So
Mm-hmm.
another one is, as I said, like taking that breath so you respond and don't react, changing the framework of, if you don't think you're accomplishing anything, we'll look at where you were 12 months, 6 months. And if you have accomplished something, then you're a high performer, because you are continually performing at a level you never have before over time, which inadvertently makes you a high performer.
Yeah.
It says it on the tin, right? So the other thing is, well, how can we not let these speed bumps in life hold us back? And how can we develop this resilience? And a nice little takeaway thing for the listeners is, I want to introduce them to my friend Ken. And Ken is this guy, with this person who has helped me overcome so many obstacles, not just physically in my speaking career, in the company that I run, and my coaching career as well. And Ken stands for three things: key, fundamentals, efficiency, and new normal. So when you're faced with adversity, and this is something that really translates perfectly into the corporate world. So working with corporate athletes, as I call them,
Hmm.
it really does translate. When you're faced with adversity or when a setback happens, what are the key fundamentals that you need to focus on? So if you think of it in a corporate world, if a company is, the stocks are dropping because of whatever is happening, there's got wind of a buyout, and everything's just sort of crashing and burning. Okay, what are the key fundamentals that we need to focus on as a company today, next week, next month, for 3 months, 6 months? What are the key fundamentals to stabilize this adversity that we're going through? Then how can we be efficient doing these key fundamentals? And then accepting that the situation you're in, this is your new normal. The adversity has already happened. You can't do anything about that. So accepting that this is your new normal, remembering why you're doing what you're doing. So that might be from the company's perspective, and I'll give an everyday life example as well in a second. But that might be, okay, the company's mission statement. That could be the why. So why you're doing it, to help you accept that this is your new normal and be comfortable in this discomfort, as the phrase goes, because you can't change anything. This is the new normal. So Ken is a great way to help you through adversity, because it, once again, it doesn't sort of give it like a positive washover, like just being positive and just focus on all the good things and just keep your chin up and keep putting one foot in front of the other. Okay, how do I do that? Well, be positive and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Okay, but how? Ken gives you a process to follow that's actually going to help you either move forward or not fall further back. So key fundamentals, how can you be efficient with those key fundamentals and accept that this is your new normal?
I like that. I like that a lot. And I also like what you said about the process, focusing on the process and not worrying about what other people are doing. Right. And so if we relate this even to a normal everyday person, there's probably someone listening right now that's like, I've been struggling to lose weight. I've wanted to lose this weight for a long time. why am I not as, losing as much weight as so-and-so or this person or that person, right? Rather than
So,
focusing on their own process, right? And getting a little bit better every day, right?
yeah. So let's dive into that example
Yeah.
using Ken.
Yeah.
Okay. What are
Great.
the key fundamentals of losing weight? Okay. You eat better quality food
Mm-hmm.
and potentially less.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to use this as a very broad example. And I
Sure.
always say, if people want to lose weight, start eating the highest quality food that you can afford,
Yep.
and then potentially maybe a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
Move. Don't like to say exercise, but sometimes moving is enough for the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Move. If you already do exercise, okay, maintain that
Mm-hmm.
and start. And the other thing that I always talk about is start taking care of your sleep,
Mm-hmm.
because it's such a massive thing. So
Yeah.
let's just not overcomplicate it, and let's just focus on those three things as the key fundamentals to help you losing weight,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're the key fundamentals. How can we be efficient with those key fundamentals? Okay, so maybe you tell everyone else in your household that you're trying to lose weight and we're going to eat the best quality food that we can. And we start making dinner time say this person's in a family. We start making dinner time a bit of a fun way of getting together and cooking together using these new foods that we haven't ate for a while, or something like that. So you make it into a fun environment for the whole family to come and cook together because dad or mum or one of the siblings is trying to lose weight. So you make it this whole community of helping this person losing weight by eating the best quality foods. Maybe you tell your friend, hey, like on Tuesdays and Thursdays, do you want to go for a walk with me after work at 6 o'clock before we have dinner? Sure. So you're being accountable, but you're being efficient because you're telling your friend and they're going to come to your door every Tuesday and Thursday night and go for a walk around the block for half an hour. That is your movement. And then your sleep. How can we be more efficient with getting better sleep? Really simple. Go to bed and get up at the same time. Like set that as a target. It might take a few months to get there, but trying to experiment with when you start to feel tired and trying to go to bed at the same time and then setting your alarm over a period of time, you might wake up naturally to get up at the same time as well, and try and remove those screens for the last sort of like hour or half an hour before you go to bed. So that's as deep as I'm going to go, but that's how we can be efficient. So maybe you use apps on your phone that can turn your phone off, or you turn your phone off at a certain time every night. Maybe you set alarms to say, hey, okay, bedtime in 30 minutes to help you be efficient with those key fundamentals. And then you've got to look in the mirror and say to yourself, okay, I don't like what I'm looking at. I don't like how I feel. However, I can't do anything about it right in this moment to change how I look and change how I feel. So I've got to accept the person who's looking back at me in the mirror. And you know what? It's going to be okay, because tomorrow we're going to be taking a figuratively and literally step forward to changing the appearance and changing how I feel about myself. So it's having a self-talk, and I mean this literally out loud in the mirror with
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Another key psychological tool that we use, self-talk. So
Mm-hmm.
lock the bathroom door so no
Mm-hmm.
one else can come in, maybe when no one else is home, and look at yourself in the mirror. Even if you want to go really extreme, take all your clothes off and be completely naked and look at yourself in the mirror. I've done this with clients over the years. And talk to yourself. Have a conversation with yourself, how you feel. This helps you accept where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do that, then it's going to allow you to go, you know what? I feel uncomfortable, but I've accepted where I'm at and I'm ready to put the work in, focusing on my key fundamentals and how I've outlined how I can be efficient to achieve those key fundamentals. That is ultimately going to help me lose that weight. And then it's
Mm-hmm.
simply rinse and repeat on a daily basis. That's Ken.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example right there. And you mentioned that even your elite athletes have essentially confidence issues, I would say, right? You'd mentioned, they don't believe that they're high performers. They don't, right? And so you can imagine someone who's not an athlete even might have more of those kind of lack of confidence, I guess, right? Is there any tip, kind of tips you have for someone who is maybe lacking in confidence and therefore is not taking the action because they're lacking the confidence, maybe?
Confidence is a three-pronged process. Okay, there's a decent amount of studies to show, like, confidence isn't an exact tool, it isn't an exact science, but we know that certain things can help improve confidence. So the first one is consistent actions.
Yes.
If you want to improve your confidence at speaking in public, whether that's in front of your team of 5 people at work or giving a presentation at the yearly conference where there's 500 people, then the only way you're going to get more confident at that act is consistent actions, doing the thing that you lack in confidence as much as you can. Now, you can dial it down. As I said, you can talk to yourself in the mirror to start with. You can go through your presentation in the mirror. You can do it to your loved one. You could do it to your animals, right? You could do it to your next door neighbor. And then maybe you could get 2 or 3 people in the living room and go through your presentation. So you start to practice this a little bit more, and add a little bit more, a few more elements to make it a little bit more real to what you're actually going to be doing. But it comes down to consistent actions. And then the second thing is you've got to have that positive self-talk. And I will highlight this in a second, but you've got to, if you're talking to yourself in a negative way, then your confidence is never going to grow. So you've got to be able to accept where you're at and then just tell yourself, I can do this. And this is where faking it till you make it actually helps.
Right.
Even if you're talking to yourself in the mirror, in the back of your head, you don't believe it, but you've got to say it out loud, because what the conversations we have in our head, the way our brain processes that differently to if we hear it through our ears. So you can say in your head to yourself, I'm confident, I love myself, I'm a great person, I'm going to do all this. However, if you say that every day out loud and you hear it, you will see a change because the way the brain processes it. So positive internal self-talk, right? That's the second thing. And then you've got to have a supportive community. Now I'm going to tie this all together as well. You've got to have people who are there supporting you. You've got to have people who are there trying to uplift you, not just drag you down. Now, here's the thing: consistent actions, positive self-talk, and a supportive community. You have all these 3 things and you focus on them, your confidence will grow. You have only 2 out of the 3, that's not good enough. You need all 3. Here's a really basic example. A child learning to ride a bike. I'm going real basic here, okay? A child learning to ride their bike. If they practice every day, if in their head they tell themselves, I'm a great bike rider, I'm awesome, look at me go, but their parents, their friends, their teachers at school, their siblings all tell them that they suck and they can't ride a bike, do you think that child is going to improve their confidence?
No.
No chance. If the child rides their bike every day and has a really supportive community, but they tell themselves every single day that they suck and can't ride a bike, their confidence is not going to be high. Now, if they tell themselves, I'm an awesome bike rider, and everyone around them says you're an awesome bike rider, but they never ride their bike, the day they get on and ride their bike, let's say most of them, they fall off and their confidence is not going to grow. So that's why we need 3 out of 3: consistent actions, positive self-talk, and a supportive community. And we can relate this to absolutely anything that you want to improve your confidence at.
That is really, really good. I really like that. So yeah, practicing the self-belief in yourself and then the community that you have supporting you as well. That is really, really good. Luke, this has been great. I know we've only scratched the surface here. I feel like we could talk for hours, but I know you have a lot of amazing resources. You speak, you coach, you have books that you've written. Where can people learn more from you and find you?
Yeah, I'm really easy to find. I have a website, luketyburski.com, and I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. My name and all my social media handles is at Luke Tyburski. And yeah, I take care of all my own accounts. So if you've got any questions, drop me a line. But you can see everything that I do, from my book that I wrote to the documentaries that I had, some of the adventures I've been on, but also the types of coaching that I do, as well as speaking that I do as well. So yeah, if anyone wants to just simply reach out and say, hey, I heard you on the Peak Performance podcast, please do drop me a note. And the thing I always ask to people is, drop me a note. And if you enjoyed the episode, tell me why and what you learned from it and how you're going to apply it to your life. So I would really love to hear from someone who's listened to this episode and what they've taken away from it. So drop me a note or come and find me at luketyburski.com, and I'd love to hear from you all.
Luke, thank you so much. This is really, really good stuff. And the more I kind of do these podcasts, the more I realize how important the mental aspect of things is, the psychology of things, right? It's like, we've had so many episodes about, the right, different ways to eat and nutrition and exercise and all that. That information is out there, right? But if you don't, it's your choice. And why are you not using it, or right? The mental aspect here, the psychology of health, really is something that is just so huge. And so, yeah, I highly recommend, if anyone is looking to learn more, go visit Luke's website, go learn more from him, shoot him a note. And Luke, we really, really appreciate you joining us here today and sharing your wisdom with everyone.
It's been my pleasure, and I'm looking forward to continuing the relationship into the future. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. And just a reminder, if you haven't yet tried any of our Peak Performance products, you get 20% off your first order. We have one of the largest selection of USDA certified organic superfood powders, as well as very high quality supplements. And you get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's www.buypeakperformance.com.